Welcome to the OncoSil Medical Investor Webinar. Today I am joined by our new chair, Dr. Thomas Duthy, and CEO and Managing Director, Nigel Lange. I'll pass the floor to Nigel. The presentation will run for approximately 30 minutes. We will have Q&A at the end. Everyone is on a forced mute, and at the conclusion of the gentleman's presentation, I will read out the questions and they can answer accordingly. So over to you, Nigel.
Thanks, Julia. Good morning, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here. I'd like to introduce you to our new incoming chair, Dr. Thomas Duthy. Tom, would you like to say something, please?
I would. Thank you, Nigel. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be with the company, starting as a non-exec director and transitioning to non-executive chairman from 1 October. As some of you on the call may know and appreciate, I have a reasonable history in interventional radiology from my time at Certex Medical Limited, and I was very excited when asked by Nigel if I could assist the company through a director role. And today's data that Nigel will be presenting, I think, is testament to the opportunity that we have here at OncoSil in the months and years ahead. As many as you will appreciate, transforming care into the interventional radiology community is where all of these minimally invasive interventional oncology products are traditionally used. And so PANCOSIL today, I think, provides some really elegant data to show that it's both safe and feasible to deliver the OncoSil device into locally advanced pancreatic cancer, where there is a dire unmet medical need, and the data that the company continues to generate to increase market access, build awareness, and see heightened clinical adoption is a function of the data that we are generating. So it's very pleasing for me to be in a position here where we can launch with myself from 1 October with a very strong position in the interventional oncology market. So over to you, Nigel, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks, Tom. So let's get started, everybody. Standard disclaimer. And so where are we today? So at the moment, we're just in a very strong position to be able to accelerate commercialization. As we've talked about over the past few months, we've got a very good opportunity in front of us. We've got certainly very compelling cost-benefit proposition, and we really don't have a direct competitor. So what are these? So we've got attractive unit economics. The average list price of the product is about 22,000 euros. As I've already stated, there's no direct competition. We have competitive modality, but that's EBRT or SBRT, but we don't consider them a direct competitor. It's a competitive modality. So it's a capital light operating model. It's a concentrated industry structure. We don't need a huge sales force to be able to effectively commercialize the technology. And the commercial scale-up manufacturing capability is certainly something that is very attractive for us. So as we've talked about in the past, we've got a new facility that is just in the final stages of being finalized. And we hope that, we can get this producing doses by the end of this calendar year. So there are multiple high-value initiatives that we've got in order to be able to broaden market access and certainly accelerate commercialization. So again, we've just talked about the PANCOSIL study, and that's the purpose really of this presentation, is to highlight how important this study is to us and what it will mean as an opportunity for the future for the company. So that study is complete. It's been presented. I'll talk a little bit more about that. So further label expansion will include the addition of a chemotherapy combination, and that is the result of the TRIP study, which was completed Q2 of calendar year 25. And of course, we are intending to expand into new markets, a couple in Latin America, and then in Southeast Asia and South Korea as well. What does pancreatic cancer look like? What does it look like at the time of diagnosis? What sorts of numbers are we looking at? So approximately 15% of patients at the time of diagnosis have the ability to undergo surgical resection with curative intent. That leads to certainly the best median overall survival outcome of about 19 months. So, as with any cancer, surgical resection is really the gold standard, and it's the only potential curative treatment for pancreatic cancer. Now, if we go to the right side of the screen and we look at patients that at the time of diagnosis have metastatic disease, that represents the majority of the patients, because pancreatic cancer, some of you may know and some may not, is really a silent disease. Patients don't really know that they've got pancreatic cancer, and when it's diagnosed, in most cases, it's diagnosed too late. So 55% of these patients at the time of diagnosis already have metastases, and their prognosis is rather poor. So it's less than 6 months median overall survival if they're only having gemcitabine chemotherapy. And if they're having gemcitabine plus nab-paclitaxel, it's about 8.5 months. And if they're having FOLFIRINOX, it's about 11.1 months. So our interest here is in the box in the middle. So we are indicated for unresectable, locally advanced pancreatic cancer, which represents approximately 30% of the patients. What are the options for these patients? So palliative therapies, chemotherapy, or chemotherapy plus or minus radiation. So that would be EBRT or SBRT. And the median overall survival here in this patient population is about 13 months. And it's important to point out too, though, that of patients, the 30% of LAPC patients will show progression to metastases within 3 to 6 months of diagnosis. So that said, it's a very aggressive disease. So what is the OncoSil device? Many of you may have heard this before, but this is simply just a refresher. As I said, it's indicated for the treatment of locally advanced unresectable pancreatic cancer. And this would be in addition to gemcitabine-based chemotherapy, the combination. And as you know, we've just completed the combination with FOLFIRINOX in the TRIP study. The OncoSil device is intended as a single-use brachytherapy device, and it consists of microparticles in a diluent. It's currently administered endoscopically under ultrasound guidance via a direct pancreatic or injection into the pancreatic tumor. And it's important to note here that we're delivering radiation over the course of 81 days. So you've got a tumor that's consistently being exposed to a decaying rate of radiation, where after 81 days, almost all of the radiation has been delivered, in fact, about 98%. So important also to note that we're not causing any concurrent damage to surrounding tissue or surrounding organs. So where does that lead us? That leads us on now to percutaneous. And percutaneous delivery, we believe, is potentially transformational to our business. And it's anticipated that we can significantly accelerate market penetration by offering another methodology in which to administer the OncoSil device. So what we're doing here is to include the specialty of interventional radiology, or as some like to be known as interventional oncologists, and that will provide broader patient access and points of care, outpatient day procedure where permitted. That's no different than today, because these patients are outpatient, even if they are treated endoscopically. But the patient is really awake. This conscious sedation, the patient is perfectly capable of speaking during the procedure. So it's certainly different. And I just want to make it clear that we're not abandoning the endoscopic application of the device. We will have both on our label. That's the intent. So speaking of, let's get into the details about the PANCOSIL trial. It was an investigator-initiated trial conducted at the University of Amsterdam. The trial was designed to look at, safety and feasibility of CT-guided percutaneous delivery of a radionuclide therapy with the OncoSil device in patients with non-progressive, locally advanced pancreatic cancer, which was an open label, single arm, phase 1/2 feasibility study. So all in all, it's designed to look at whether this is feasible. Is it technically feasible? And is it safe? So that was the objective. So the study sites it was a single site, so Amsterdam UMC. The principal investigator is somebody that's very well known in pancreatic cancer circles, Professor Mark Besselink, who is a pancreatobiliary surgeon from Amsterdam. And the interventional radiologists are very well known for their research. So Professor Martijn Meijerink and Professor Otto van Delden. The study recruited 20 subjects. The primary endpoint, again, safety and feasibility of percutaneous radionuclide therapy using the OncoSil device, defined by the percentage of device or procedural related grade 3 toxicities or higher adverse events until 90 days post-procedure. This study was presented on the 16th of this month at the Cardiovascular and Interventional Radiological Society of Europe Annual Congress, which was held in Barcelona. It was presented by a team member from Professors Meijerink and van Delden, Dr. Daniela Voss, who is a research associate in radiology and nuclear medicine, did the presentation. And it's important to note here that CIRSE is perhaps one of the most important congresses from a scientific point of view that draws people globally from the interventional radiology community. So, we were on the world stage, and I think that's very exciting for us because it certainly increases the awareness and can serve to help with adoption and open referral pathways. So what was the study design? The study, as I mentioned before, was 20 patients with unresectable locally advanced pancreatic cancer and partial response or stable disease after at least 2 months of standard of care systemic treatment, which means chemotherapy. They would be considered eligible for inclusion. So if we look at the study flowchart. I don't want to get too much into the nitty gritty here, but if these patients had locally advanced pancreatic cancer and they were unresectable, they would go directly into the treatment. If they were borderline resectable and they decided to do an explorative laparotomy, if it was decided that they were not eligible for surgery, then they would be out of the study. But if it was decided that they would be eligible for the OncoSil device, and they were definitely non-resectable, then they would be treated with OncoSil as well. So if we look at the baseline characteristics, the median age was 62 years old, almost a 50-50 split between male and female. The ECOG performance status, most of them were ECOG 0, which means they were pretty healthy, pretty robust. One was an ECOG, or 7 were ECOG 1s, and 1 was an ECOG 2. So the median was a 2, and systemic chemotherapy. Before the study, 19 patients had FOLFIRINOX, 1 patient had FOLFIRINOX plus nivolumab. Most of the tumors, 6 of the tumors in the subjects were in the head of the pancreas, and 12 were in other locations. So important to note here too that the longest lesion diameter was 41 millimeters, and I think if I'm correct, the largest tumor was about 6 centimeters. So very encouraging that they were able to treat that patient. The CA99, which is a tumor marker, the median range was 105. So what is the outcome? What do the results look like? So from a safety point of view, there was no procedure-related mortality observed. 2 or 10% of the 20 patients experienced grade 3 serious adverse events within 90 days, 1 procedure-related and 1 possibly device-related. However, both patients recovered. There were no other procedure or device-related events. The events were consistent with the expectations in this patient population. Feasibility. The technical success rate was 90%, and it demonstrated reliable and reproducible delivery of the OncoSil device via the percutaneous approach. The investigators concluded that it is feasible to perform implantation with patients conscious, thereby reducing the length of the procedure and the post-procedure recovery. What are the efficacy signals? Well, 3 patients, or 15%, demonstrated a partial response by RECIST criteria compared to the tumor size prior to implantation, and therefore, in addition to response from chemotherapy alone. The median overall survival was 20.6 months from the time of diagnosis, which compares favorably to historical outcomes in this patient population. The quote, we're kind enough to get a quote from Professor Meyerink, and the quote is, "The PANCOSIL study shows that percutaneous CT-guided implantation of the OncoSil device is safe and feasible while offering encouraging signals of clinical benefit. This approach enables interventional radiologists to deliver the treatment with precision and reproducibility. In our view, this represents an important step towards making radionuclide therapy more widely available for patients with locally advanced pancreatic cancer subject to regulatory approval. So what does that mean for us? It enables us to drive adoption and engage in further market expansion. So it gives us the opportunity to expand clinical adoption and take advantage of the market opportunity in front of it. So broadening the base of treating clinicians to include interventional radiologists is very important. There is strong alignment with IR's existing expertise in radiation-based therapies, and a case in point for this would be TheraSphere or Cerasphere's Yttrium-90, which is used to treat primary liver cancer or liver metastases. So what we also have the benefit of here is enhanced multidisciplinary collaboration with medical oncologists and surgeons to help drive adoption. Interventional radiology have a very important seat at tumor boards, so this increases visibility and patient referral flow. It provides us with expanded patient access points through both hospital and potentially outpatient settings. That obviously, an outpatient setting is really quite regional specific, but it does give us that opportunity to explore that as well. So from an operational and patient care perspective, it can be done certainly as an outpatient day procedure where permitted. As I said, it varies from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but it supports higher throughput and reduced hospital burden. Local anesthesia improves patient comfort and overall experience. Patients are home. Generally, they were discharged after about 2 hours at the University of Amsterdam. With the adoption by interventional radiology, what we'll see is simplified planning and faster procedure times, which can certainly help with the scalability of the treatment. So upcoming milestones and execution plan for OncoSil, and now I'm talking about financial year 2026. Q2 will see the full clinical results, so anticipate full data readout to reinforce clinical efficacy and safety profile. Key inflection point is to support reimbursement discussions and strengthen our commercial positioning. There's also an element of risk mitigation here, so active engagement with investigators and KOLs to ensure robust data collection and timely readout. The second half of financial year 2026, regulatory and local approval, so targeted label expansion with central regulatory authority, which is BSI in our case, in Europe and the United Kingdom. And this will be followed obviously by country-specific approvals where required. Ongoing market access and commercial preparation, comprehensive country and account mapping to segment treatment responsibilities between interventional radiologists and endoscopists. As I mentioned very early on, and I want to re-emphasize this point, we're not abandoning endoscopic application. We will have both. And what we do see are regional differences where in some regions you'll find interventionalists much more prominent. In others, you'll see that this will be done by endoscopy. So we intend to establish clear pathways for adoption in both inpatient and outpatient settings. Again, that's region specific. Germany is a prime example. These patients will not be released on the same day. They'll be considered inpatient. It's an inpatient treatment. And the reason for that is because that's the way the the technology is going to be reimbursed. So it's important to note too that any future clinical trials will have the inclusion of the percutaneous application as an option. So upcoming milestones. What are the significant catalysts for us over the next 18 months? So in the first half of, and now I'm talking about calendar year. So in the first half of calendar year 2025, we saw the completion of the PANCOSIL study. We saw the completion of the TRIP FFX study. We've submitted to TGA, and we've expanded into new hospitals and existing geographies. We anticipate that in the second half of calendar year 2025, that we hope to have TGA approval. We will also have the HDE filed with FDA for distal cholangiocarcinoma. It is our hope as well, our intention certainly, and we're working toward that goal, is to see the first commercial supply coming out of the facility in Sydney. And things are moving now, as we've discussed in the past, with the GBA study. The GBA are moving quite rapidly by their standards to select a CRO, and we're hoping that that announcement will come before the end of this calendar year. So what's in store for us in calendar year 2026? So in the first half, there'll be label expansion to include percutaneous delivery. This will actually facilitate a stronger launch into the GCC region. So this is in the Middle East, and it's certainly something that they are looking forward to, because we think that with percutaneous, that will certainly enhance our position there. And then we've got regulatory dossier filings in Argentina, Brazil, and South Korea. And again, hopefully within the first half of calendar year 2026, we will see the label expansion with the addition of FOLFIRINOX chemotherapy added to our label. In the second half of calendar 2026, we will launch in additional Southeast Asian countries, and we anticipate that we should have an FDA approval for DCCA, certainly in the second half of calendar year 2026. So thanks very much, everybody. Happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Nigel. I have plenty of questions here. Firstly, is it feasible to perform implantation of the OncoSil device while patients are conscious? What ramifications will this have for device sales, both from a volume sold and a sales margin perspective?
Yes, indeed it is possible to administer the treatment when the patient is conscious. I mean, they've proven that in this study. The first 5 patients underwent general anesthesia, and then the patients underwent conscious sedation, and now it's just local anesthesia. So they've progressed through 3 stages in terms of being able to evaluate how the patient reacts when they're being, when the device is being administered percutaneously. So they're very comfortable with the patients not having it, just having, local anesthesia. Anecdotally, I can tell you that in discussions with them, patients are feeling extremely well after the procedure.
Thank you.
And there's another part to that question. So I think what it means also for the hospital is that there will be the ability to increase patient throughput. I mean, it's not difficult for somebody to be able to do 4 patients in one morning. So in a busy pancreatic center, such as Amsterdam, where they have a tumor board dedicated every Thursday only to pancreatic cancer patients, they'll be able to increase throughput because they're not having to rely on anesthesiology, having to put the patient under in order to treat them. So it speeds up the procedure significantly. It doesn't improve our margin, but it certainly improves the margin for the hospital. So it makes it much more attractive for them.
Thank you. Does the PANCOSIL finding that percutaneous administration of the OncoSil device is safe and feasible have the same degree of significance across regulatory processes now occurring in key target markets?
Yeah, I think, when we file to get this put on our label, certainly with the European regulator, then it goes across all markets, right? So I don't believe that there's going to be any local regulations that would prevent us from treating patients percutaneously once it's on our label. However, I did mention during the presentation that there are regional differences. So there are differences in not by country, but sometimes it's by institution. Some institutions may continue to treat using endoscopic ultrasound application, while there are others, and particularly new institutions, that will want to start this using the percutaneous application. Tom, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
I don't. No, thanks, Nigel.
Okay.
Thank you, Nigel. Plenty more questions. Thank you. Does any shift to inserting the OncoSil device while patients are conscious add another layer of complexity to the regulatory approvals process?
Not at all. Not in my opinion, and I believe that our Director of Regulatory Affairs would certainly concur with that.
Thank you. How does OncoSil think about the cost-sparing aspects attributable to the percutaneous procedure, given local anaesthetic, day procedure, and time versus endoscopic ultrasound?
Well, I think it's more attractive all the way around. I think it benefits us because, as I mentioned in answer to one of the other questions, that it helps to increase patient throughput. Right? And I think what's important here too is that the representation at multidisciplinary tumor boards by interventional radiology here is hugely important. And interventional radiology have a lot of experience already dealing with radioactive product. So, when we talk about the likes of TheraSphere or Surspheres, which carry a fairly high payload of radiation, it doesn't require an alteration of their practice. They're used to working with it. So I think it's just a natural progression for them to adopt this other technology. And they're very good at adopting new technology and adding something to their toolbox.
Thank you. Could you provide additional color as to the nature of the reported adverse events? Could you provide additional color as to what the nature of the reported adverse events were?
So there was I can't give you the specific details because, I'm not really supposed to do that. Suffice it to say, they were considered grade 3, but they resolved. One was a technical issue where the dose was inadvertently administered to a part of a cyst within the pancreas itself, and that caused some abdominal discomfort for the patient. But in both instances, the patients recovered. So that's why the team deems it to be still safe and very feasible. So they were not put off for the fact that they had these two these SAEs.
Nigel, it might be worth commenting just for the investors, if you compare and contrast the grade 3 SAE rates in this trial relative to what you would see in the ordinary course of OncoSil delivery endoscopically? How does that compare?
It's favorable. I mean, there's no difference. We're not overall, the device is considered extremely safe. So it doesn't detract from the overall safety profile of the device itself. Most of the side effects that we see in these patients actually occur before the administration of the OncoSil device because they're related to chemotherapy. They're not really device related. The side effects are really related to the chemotherapy that the patients are on before the device is actually administered. So I think the safety profile using both methodologies is very favorable.
I've got a question here regarding chemotherapy. Did patients receive chemotherapy after OncoSil's delivery?
Patients always receive chemotherapy after OncoSil. They're never taken off chemotherapy. That would be quite rare.
Okay. Thank you.
The reason they would be taken off is because they couldn't tolerate it any longer. But most patients, as a matter of fact, the OncoSil device gives the patient a bit of a holiday from chemo because they cease chemo 2 days before the OncoSil device is administered, and then they stay off for another 2 days, and then they can resume their chemotherapy. So in fact, we give them a bit of a chemo holiday, but yes, it's important that the patient continue to receive their chemotherapy unless they can't tolerate it.
Thank you, Nigel. Would an additional trial be required to support interventional radiologist use, or is PANCOSIL sufficient for this?
Well, we hope we're going to submit it to the regulator, so we hope it's sufficient. I think, look, this meeting just put us on the world stage with this group of medical specialists. And I think it's particularly important, too, when we talk about the United States as an example, right? So interventional radiology in the US and being able to do this as an outpatient procedure enhances the ability for the hospital to get reimbursed. So you book patients in under a 23-hour stay. They're actually not in the hospital for 23 hours. They have the procedure. If there are no post-procedural complications, they're released and they go home. And the hospital maximizes their reimbursement. So the return, and the hospital's actually, it's a disincentive for the hospital to keep the patient overnight. This is a big advantage when we're dealing with the system in the United States.
Thank you. Justin has asked, have any hospitals in Germany successfully negotiated reimbursement? If so, which centres and in which month do you expect the first commercially paid approval to occur in Germany?
Justin, that's a good question. There are now 6 hospitals that have successfully negotiated with the Krankenkassen or statutory health funds for reimbursement of the OncoSil device. There are 3 hospitals are actually waiting for their license upgrade. So nuclear medicine licenses, there needs to be enough headroom on the license so that anything that isn't used still counts against the license. So some of the hospitals need to increase their license, and all of these applications are underway. We were actually, I'd made the statement before that we were hoping that we'd have a German patient treated and paid for in the current month, but it looks like that is about to happen next month.
Thank you, Nigel. We've got a subsequent question from Dennis here. What can you tell us about the nature of the of the 2 grade 3 adverse events?
but I think it's similar to the question that we just had before. So it was a puncture of a cyst in one of them, and the other one I'm not sure of the exact detail, but
It was an ulcer.
Suffice it to say that. What's that?
It was an ulcer that resolved.
Thank you.
Right.
Yep.
Thanks for clarifying that.
So really, yeah.
Okay, Justin, what was the
More
actual
questions?
One more. Justin, what was the actual dollar value of sales last quarter, and how are sales tracking this quarter?
We don't give forward guidance. We have our quarterly out in October. With respect to the last quarter, that's on the Appendix 4C cash flow
Right.
statement. Nigel?
Thank you so much,
Correct.
everyone. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending today. A recording of this webinar will be published soon. If you have any further questions, please email me at julia@thecapitalnetwork.com.au. And thank you so much for your interest in OncoSil.